Hi guys, Vince here once again, and today I'm going to be giving you my quick gut reaction review of Stephen King's It. Just a very quick important distinction: this is the original Stephen King's It, which is a TV miniseries back in 1990, and not the upcoming, what some are considering to be a reboot, as the film It in 2017. The reason I'm doing this review, or one of the reasons at least, is because of that film coming up, and I thought this would be a bit more interesting and poignant. So the first thing I want to point out immediately is with this being a TV miniseries, some people will have watched this in different ways, some in bits, of course others as a whole. It is 3 hours long, just over 3 hours, 3 hours 12 if I remember correctly, depending on how of course you watch it. So it's not for the faint of heart, and it is a very long sitting if you want to go through it in one go. I myself watched it over 2 nights in 2 halves, effectively as 2 separate films. And the reason I thought that was very simple is because from looking up a couple of basic notes and reviews people have put out, some people had looked at it as effectively 2 separate films, with the first half covering the children's story, and the second half looking at the adult story. So yeah, with that said, some people like to think of it as effectively 2 movies in one, and I think you could almost do that, except for of course the fact that it is one continuous narrative, and then it does feel, certainly if you watched it as 2 separate films, very disjointed. One of the first things that I would also point out is that I think the overall plot and the subject matter here is very strong, with clowns and children's always a weird one, and clowns in general are generally rated as one of the most uncomfortable and highest, most common phobias that people have. And Tim Curry does an excellent job as Pennywise the clown, the nemesis here, in really playing out the clown and really covering, also being weirdly quite playful at times, but also absolutely terrifying, and really leaving you not quite sure where you are with him or what's going to happen next, and really playing up the uneasy side that comes with clowns, and really that sort of, they call it the uncanny valley, not quite being able to recognize someone as a human. And he really is very good there. He's very good nemesis and villain, and he for me is the highlight of the film. The overall, the characters themselves as well, it's quite a weird one, of course, with having both the child version of these characters and then the adult version as well later on. It's kind of difficult to really give them one solid sort of opinion or rating, but having said that, the characters as children do feel like they have a genuine bond together. The child acting throughout is quite good. Most of the children do have a rapport with each other, and they feel organic and natural to the situations. It doesn't seem sort of odd or weird, the circumstances they end up in and go through together. And there's a good sort of underdog vibe to certainly the first half of the story. Having said that, the adult acting, which comes of course in the second half, is very hit and miss for me, and there is also a prologue rather at the start to really sort of set the scene, and I thought that was very flabby and unnecessary for the overall series, and really didn't really add much. And also a number of the characters just aren't very likable or endearing in any particular way, and I can't help but wonder what they really bring to the table. There's nothing particularly that would jump out at them. Some of them I find very difficult even now to remember specific details for. So that's really one of the areas in which the film falls over. I don't think the actors there really pulled their weight, and it might just be that they weren't given too much to work with, to be perfectly frank. So that's a shame. However, I do think the first half of the film really helps keep that up and makes it a lot more interesting, and the rapport and the first half really builds a good platform to take through to the second half, which I personally feel isn't really executed on as much as possible. There's a good amount of effort put in to build up the lore of Pennywise, who he is, what's happened, how he comes through, and what he's all about. And that really does, particularly in the later stages of the film, does actually build a good sense of lore and mystique about him, to make you really care about how exactly we're going to achieve overcoming this, and why it's happening, and how exactly they're going to push through together, and if they're all going to come through in one piece. So that's good, and obviously it's something you want in a horror film, to actually care about the characters and the circumstances they're in, to draw you in to the film itself. So that really works well. And I would also point out that the aesthetics featured within are well done. It does feel like an organic, natural environment. You can imagine the town that these kids are in. It just feels like your typical everyday kids, middle American town, and they're going through the average scrapes. And the way the story develops, particularly with the kids, it does feel more organic. You can really relate to some of the particular things that they go through, particularly the girl. I can remember there's a couple of pretty horrific moments for her, and also some quite uncomfortable topics regarding family life, which are really tackled and make you really feel for the characters a bit more. So that's all done fairly well. However, I think overall, it's the overall series, or however you want to interact with it, is let down by just being massively overdrawn out. 3 hours 10 could quite comfortably become 2 hours for me, whether it's a series or not. There's a lot of things which don't really add much. The first act in particular doesn't really add much. There are ancillary characters that are brought in which just seem pointless, and it really slows down the pace as we move towards the later stages of the series. It really makes you feel as though you don't really care, quite frankly, with what happens to some of the guys, which is unfortunate because it does a good job originally of building that rapport, building that platform, and making you feel like that there's a real struggle going on here. So just to really wrap up, I suppose it's a film that had a really good platform to work on. There's a lot of good subject matter. However, unfortunately, it's let down by weak pacing, flabby plot, and weak characterization. Strong points are certainly the villain themselves, and some of the moments they end up with, some of the scenes have really stuck out in my memory, and particularly when you consider the fact that this is a series that's effectively 30 years old. Some of the effects that are used are very impressive, and are quite similar, I think, in some respects to the likes of Nightmare on Elm Street, where they're old-fashioned and not, of course, not very CGI focused, but they still feel authentic and interesting, rather than just sort of thrown together and lazy. So for me, it's going to have to come in at a 5.7 out of 10. There are some really good moments to be had that will stick out in my mind, and in the right hands this could have comfortably been a high or at least a mid 7, which is certainly a good rating on my book. But there's just too much wrong and too much that lets it down as a whole and sags the film or series to really give anything more than a slightly above average rating. So for me personally, as I said, I was really disappointed with this because I felt there was such a good platform to build on, and I am somewhat cautiously optimistic that the reboot will deliver on this, because it will be, of course, a much faster and much more to the point film, and it does look to be doing the right things with the lore and the mystique that the actual novel itself is based on. So that's my review, guys. Let me know what you think, if you agree with what I have to say here, or if I'm perhaps being a bit harsh. What do you think of the new upcoming It film? Is that going to deliver on what you're hoping on, or not? So don't forget to like and subscribe to see more horror movie reviews and other unrelated content, and we'll see you again next time. Cheers.